All right, welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Reporting Norms. It's great to have you back, and I've got two great gentlemen here with me, great guests who have started a company, very interesting company in the golf industry, and we'll learn much more about that in a moment. But I wanted to give you a introduction to the two gentlemen that I have with me today, and I'll begin with Jamie Cook. So, Jamie, just go and raise your hand. And Jamie, you began your career on the finance side of golf as a partner and CFO of OB Sports. He ran the accounting and finance for a national management and development platform and stewarded a $150 million portfolio and raised more than $100 million in equity and debt support growth. He then moved into advisory work as a consulting CFO for real estate developers. He built full project pro formas, managed cost accounting, and specialized in profit distribution structures such as waterfall and preferred return models that align incentives amongst partners. His personal investing includes a healthcare real estate project he co-developed with his wife, who's a physician. He trained in accounting and finance at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, qualified as a CPA, and splits time between North Bend, Washington, and Tucson, Arizona. Today, he channels that background into Green Lake Golf, which was launched in March of 2025. The firm helps owners modernize golf courses while lowering environmental impact and unlocking value in non-golf land through responsible reuse. Jamie leads finance and deal architecture across a multi-phased review that maps legal and regulatory hurdles, evaluates course adjustments, and identifies the highest and best use of newly developable acres. The mission is clear and measurable: guide properties to sustainability without sacrificing profitability, and deliver a turnkey path that integrates renovation, legal guidance, real estate services, and sustainability best practices. Industry voices have called the approach an exemplar for climate resilient land management, a signal that careful structuring and sound design can serve both balance sheet and communities. And I'd also now like to introduce you to Jeff. Jeff, go ahead and raise your hand. Hey, Jeff. Jeff Schwinkendorf is a builder who now leads with clear sustainability mandate. As principal of Green Lake Golf, founded in March of 2025 and based in Phoenix, he helps course owners future-proof their properties by right-sizing turf, lowering water use, and integrating environmental conscious housing without losing the essence of the game. He oversees project planning, design, construction, growth initiatives, and client engagement. Every engagement is aligned to climate resilience, smart land use, and the realities of Arizona's fifth management plan, which I think we'll talk about more in just a moment. The model is integrated by design, bringing together design, real estate, legal, and sustainability expertise so courses can become lighter on the land and stronger as businesses. Before launching GLG, Jeff spent nearly 9 years at Troon as vice president of construction and renovation, where he helped scale a fast-growing division following Troon's 2019 acquisition of OB Sports. That chapter sharpened his focus on pragmatic outcomes. He emphasized measurable reductions in water and maintenance inputs, dependable schedules, and on-budget delivery that improves owner returns. His perspective is grounded in 2 decades in the field. Jeff managed the 2-year construction of Trinity Forest Golf Club in Dallas, which opened on time despite regulatory hurdles, environmental sensitivities, and record flooding. Earlier, he contributed to the tour caliber renovation of TPC Potomac, which later hosted the Champions Tour Constellation Open in 2010, the Quicken Loans National in 2018, and the Wells Fargo Championship in 2021. He also led complex projects overseas as senior project manager with Flagstick GCCM in Beijing and began his career with Wadsworth Golf Construction Company. Across more than 150 projects worldwide, Jeff's through line is execution. Turn constraints into buildable solutions and make the numbers work. Holds a BA in history and landscape architecture from the University of Washington and an MS in golf course architecture from the University of Edinburgh. He lives in Phoenix with his family. So welcome very well, gentlemen. Good to have you here. So let's talk about Green Lake Golf. It's a company that you launched earlier this year. Its mission is to offer a seamless, comprehensive solution that integrates design, legal, real estate, and sustainability expertise. So tell me about how you conceptualized the idea of this company, and just tell us a little bit more about how your background is well suited to service your clients.
Sure. Thank you, Norm. We're happy to be here. I think I speak on behalf of both Jamie and I. And I will have to say, I noticed you started out with the easy last name first on the introductions there of Jamie Cook versus Jeff Schwinkendorf. But so I can't fault you for that. But thank you again for the introduction. It's always kind of interesting to sit and listen to somebody read something about you, but appreciate it. And we're happy to be here, like I said. So I guess just to dig right in, and I have to say I'm kind of pleased that we're starting where is really kind of a description of what our origin story is, and it's pretty critical to how we operate and will operate as an enterprise. And so appreciate the opportunity to kind of give you a little bit of a backstory there. And if you'll indulge me, and I'm going to try to paraphrase here, and Jamie will kind of riff with me here, but the long and the short of it is that Jamie and I shared a mentor over the years. Now, the interesting thing is that our being under this mentorship with this individual, and I'll bring you up to speed on who that is. Our time with him was separated by about a decade or so. Orrin Vincent, who was the founder of OB Sports, he founded the company in 1972, and Orrin was considered a real innovator in the golf and industry, generally speaking, and really kind of a renaissance innovator in the sense that he innovated in the golf shop, in operations, in the construction and development of new properties, and then the operations thereof. He was always kind of a forward thinking, kind of the entrepreneurial kind of mindset of a gentleman. And so I will say that, and maybe I can kind of kick it over to Jamie here, but Jamie, his story with him under Orrin's tutelage began in the late 90s. And Jamie, maybe you can give kind of your background with that relationship.
Yeah, actually, I started with Orrin in 91, and, we initially, my role in OB Sports was on the operations side. We basically managed and ran golf courses, and so it was a typical business. You had a maintenance side, you had a food and beverage side, you had a retail side. Then we started to develop our own courses, raised our equity, raised our debts, started developing courses in the late 90s. So my role became more project oriented as opposed to operations, which gives me, I think, in this new endeavor, a good understanding of how operations are impacted by.
Right. And so Jamie was with Orrin at a very critical time, a very formative time in the kind of the life span of OB Sports in the kind of the late 90s and early 2000s, where they were really developing properties from the ground up and then operating those facilities going forward. But then, and interestingly enough, Jamie, I might not have the exact date, but I think it was around 2006 or so that you were with OB Sports. And then you go 10 years from there, I ended up being recruited and then eventually signing on with OB Sports in 2016. I got to know him really well and struck up a really good relationship and dialogue that lasted for many years. And part of that dialogue, even though I was running his construction division for his company, oftentimes involved some other kind of concepts or business ideas, various enterprises or endeavors that I thought in the golf space that, I would benefit from bouncing off of, someone of his stature and intellect and just wherewithal in the golf space. And so it became kind of a normal practice for me or for he and I to engage in these conversations. We'd sit down and go through our day-to-day business and operations and reporting, and then he and I would just kind of spitball for a little bit. And over the course of several years, I had this vision of this enterprise and kind of a business model that I felt was becoming more and more viable in my own kind of headspace, but I would always seek kind of some clarity from him too, or affirmation or something. And we would bounce things back and forth, like I said, often, but it got to the point where I had this model that is what has become Green Lake Golf, but truly back then, even more of its infancy. And it was at that point where he, for the first time, really gave me solid indication of endorsement. Like, I think you might have something here. And one of the first comments he made to me after making that comment was, I need to I need to introduce you to Jamie Cook. And so that always, I had plans to reach out to Jamie, and I even at one point, I think, asked him for an introduction. And then unfortunately, and this is where it almost becomes, there's some level of sentimentality here, in that Orrin, his health degraded substantially over a short period of time. And soon after that last conversation he and I shared, is with him indicating he wanted Jamie and I to connect, he actually passed away. And this was in 2021. And so I almost felt that it was incumbent upon me to, regardless, to reach out to Jamie, to just kind of cold call him. And it was an easy introduction and backstory, because like I said, we both shared, Orrin in our career and the history. But I ended up going down to visit with Jamie on a couple of occasions, and we got into kind of the meat of what I was kind of theorizing about at the time. And he added his opinion and insight. And it wasn't, this was probably a year and a half ago. And it was very much soon thereafter, we decided to formalize that with a partnership and go forward together. So that is how, in answer to your question, how Jamie and I ended up teaming up. It was almost kind of a posthumous introduction that our shared mentor made for us.
So was you have a common mentor, but also it sounds like there's a connection with OB Sports, an overlap there as well.
It was, that mentorship was at each of our time or tenures at OB Sports.
Yeah, gotcha.
For sure.
Okay. Jamie, did you have anything that you wanted to add, to that story?
Well, in terms of kind of the genesis of where Jeff said he came from, we live in the desert. I grew up in Las Vegas, and we spent quite a bit of time, my wife and I, in Arizona. And water is obviously the big concern, and will continue to be more and more going forward. And we recognize golf courses are, by people who they look at it as the, I guess, the evil doer in the desert area. That golf courses use too much water, they waste water, which we understand that concern. But I think where we benefit from that is when we look to take a golf course and take a piece of that golf course and create it into a parcel that can be redeveloped, for example, residential. Well, the sustainability story there is the residential will use 75% of the water that a golf course would use. So if you took 10 acres of a golf course, 10 acres of the residential is going to use 75 or 25% of that water that a golf course would use. And so we're kind of using that problem that exists here and addressing it from both sides. The golf course is going to save a significant amount of money on their water costs. They're going to get a piece of property that they can then sell, and the community is going to benefit because there's less water being used by a residential as opposed to a golf course.
Okay,
Right. And I might be able to, if you don't mind, I could maybe add a little bit of data to that as well. Just as it relates to the comparative water usage between residential and golf course. Generally speaking, on average, regardless of climate, but we usually tend to gravitate to the desert areas southwest for most of our kind of case study analysis, because that is where, the scarcity of water is of the greatest or most urgent kind of concern. Even though we feel that those needs and desires will permeate through the country at a given time. Eventually, if you don't have water regulations that are imposing on your budget line, you probably soon will. But it just happens to be the most pressing in the Southwest. And so I use that as kind of a disclaimer, is when I reference some of these water consumption models or data, it's based on a golf course that would be irrigated here in Phoenix. And if you look at a golf course or playable surface, that which is a maintained or managed surface, on average, you're looking at about 170,000 gallons of water per acre per month. So if you are endeavoring to apply some of the suite of services that Green Lake provides or is in a position to propose, there may be a chance of where we can create a reduction of your turf footprint. Let's say on average, for the sake of this example, 10 acres. We're able to reduce your maintained turf footprint by? Well, you take 10 acres times 170,000 gallons a month. It's 1.7 million gallons of water per month. You take that over the span of 12 months over a year, that's 20 million gallons of water. Now, our water sources are varied down here as well. So, but just to take an average, whether you're buying potable or using effluent or otherwise, let's say you're using, $2.50 per thousand gallons for 20 million gallons over the span of 12 months. Right out of the gate, that's just a $50,000 drop right off right off your bottom line. So, or right adding to your bottom line. So we have that immediate savings or reduction in costs in the ballpark of $50,000 just by reducing your golf footprint by 10 acres. But then it's not just the water costs that we're looking to seek some cost efficiencies on. It's also the maintenance of that 10 acres. You don't just water it and you call it good. There's a significant amount of man hours, equipment, chemicals, fuel, everything. In our analysis, those costs for those 10 acres are roughly double what your water costs would be, in the neighborhood of $100,000 over the span of a year. So you look at right out of the gate, there's $150,000 with, just simply reducing your turf footprint. But if you can reduce your turf footprint by those 10 acres, those reduction in costs kind of take care of themselves by default almost. But at the same time, our eyes are on the real prize of this developable area in the ballpark of 10 acres that we could then package and rezone and go through whatever regulatory requirements are necessary in order to propose a certain level of real estate development, whether it be residential, commercial, retail, or otherwise.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for those numbers, because on the reporting norms, we like to think about things in numbers and and that kind of stuff. But when I think about a golf course, is a golf course have approximately 150 to 170 acres roughly to if for an 18-hole golf course? Is that right?
Yeah,
Right.
on average, it's a ballpark of about 150 acres. But one caveat I would highlight is that when you see that reference, that's more of kind of just a total acreage of just your footprint of land. Whereas most 18-hole golf courses, as it relates to the actual irrigated or maintained turf, is a little bit less than that, because a lot of these areas on the golf course, whether they be bunkers or out of play areas, native areas, other desert landscape or what have you, those are included in that 150 number, but they're not necessarily included in the irrigation footprint number. So, I'd say if you were to talk about a 150-acre golf course of total land, you're probably in the ballpark of 100 or so acres of actual irrigated turf.
Okay, got it. So with 10 acres that you might target for reuse from a golf course, you're talking about maybe 10% playable surface of the course itself that would be reused. Couple questions there. How do you sort of maintain playability and sort of the how that might change the players that are used to playing on 100 50 acres versus 140 acres or what have you. And then also determining, sort of which parcel of the 10 acres, should be considered. I guess those are some high level questions, but maybe you could provide some insight on some of that viewpoint. Yeah.
Sure, and I'll jump in, and then Jamie can kind of add some filler here and there if need be. So there is a little bit of a delicate dance there, naturally, because you have to think that inherently, if you're infringing just on a matter of area on a recreational activity, that you're compromising that experience in some way. And that's not necessarily the case, but I certainly see that that's where your question comes from. And it's a frequent question that we often field. So it's something too that, and this partly is perhaps a little bit fortuitous for us in the golf industry in general, that there has been, we feel we're at the beginning of a bit of a paradigm shift as it relates to what a golfer's impression is of a golf experience. Meaning there are not just tolerances, but in many cases, even preferences for kind of a non-traditional golf experience. I think it's a generational thing too. I think you look at not just the newer or incoming golfers, but also the newer or active and forward-thinking operators and developers, that there's a little bit more of a conscious effort towards sustainably led design and operations thereof. And also, as I alluded to, this non-traditional golf concept. One of the biggest pushbacks I think that you get on a social level or familial setting of golf is that, the father of a household or whatever goes out and joins his buddies for 6 acres or 6 hours of golf on a Saturday. And that's just not, that's becoming less and less common, even as a desire to do that. But it's becoming less and less commonplace. And so it's not that they don't want to spend, 5 hours with their friends, or in some cases when you go golfing with your family, to spend 5 or 6 hours with your family on the golf course. But generally speaking, they're looking for a reduction of that time, but they would like to spend it on a golf course. Now, whether that be a 9-hole loop, or if there's a scenario in which there's a traditional 18-hole golf course that that the owner and developer, our client, would have a certain level of tolerance to kind of reimagine that golf experience to something different than 18 holes, which is something we kind of test early on. What is everybody has a certain level of open-mindedness on conversation, but when it comes to putting the rubber on the road, people can stall a little bit, but we really try to gauge our clients' tolerances for reimagining the golf experience. And in some cases, and we would argue in all cases, always towards an enhancement of that golf experience. So whether it be 18 holes and that gets reduced to 9 holes, but plus a 3-hole par 3 loop and an expanded short game facility, plus, maybe a slot at pickleball courts, and you still have 15 acres of developable land that you unlocked as a result, while still enhancing your member experience or your patrons experience, then that is really what we're after. And that's kind of and Jamie began to allude to, there's nothing but wins here as far as we're concerned for our client, our partner, the developer, the golf course owner, the golf course patron, the families, the community. And like I said, there's just a lot of wins here that we feel confident in promoting and getting done.
Yeah, I'll just add that, as Jeff said, the golf industry is becoming, or the playing habits are more family oriented, more inclusive or for everybody. And so whether that's a 9-hole golf course, or converting from a 18 hole to a 9-hole or 12 hole, and maybe having pickleball, maybe having golf simulators. Golf simulator business right now is explosive because you go there, your family can come, you can eat, you can have some drinks, there's lots of things for the entire family to do while they hit balls. And so I think it's important to know that, especially how the game has grown in the last few years since COVID with the younger generation, they're not necessarily, as Jeff said, they're necessarily looking to spend 6, 7 hours out on the golf course. I know personally, I could go out and play 9 holes instead of 18 holes, and be just as happy or happier. And we could do a lot with a 9-hole golf course that exists, that is going to be built or rerouted on an 18-hole piece of property. There's a lot of alternative development opportunities there.
Mm. Very interesting. So it's not only the regulation that is perhaps driving some of these changes, but it sounds like the evolution around how golf is enjoyed by the general public has also been evolving over the last few years. You mentioned pickleball. That seems real popular. So is that really one of the selling points as you approach owners and saying, "Hey, the game's evolving. You got water restrictions coming along. Here are some other revenue streams that you could be thinking about." Maybe talk a little bit about how you approach, your clients, potential clients.
Yeah, and I guess, not to reiterate, but something I would expand upon there is, there seems to be, we feel, and we're basing our business around it, there is a convergence of circumstances that we think add to the viability of our business. And some of them we already mentioned, the water restrictions, which are currently in place and will only get more rigid down the road, regardless of where you are in the country. It's a tolerance, but it's, like I said, it's more connotated as a preference for golfers and patrons to do something non-traditional as it relates to their golf experience. From a golf course owner's perspective, and I would strip down our kind of proposition to something like, this is truly at its core, it's a real estate play, but conducted in the name and on behalf of sustainability and long-term responsible resource management. But its true financial benefit is at the tail end of the application of our suite of services, which the yield is, a 10 or 15 acre footprint of developable space, that with us handling the marketing and sales transaction of that developable parcel, that's the true gravy at the end of the rainbow, to, I guess, mix my metaphors there, but for the client. And then also for us as a business, we tie our interest financially and our true incentivization to partner with the owner so that we're all collectively sharing in what we all collectively see to create the maximum amount of value for that developable parcel.
Mm. And to sort of effect these changes, it sounds, I mean, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles, legal hurdles, environmental hurdles, just a ton of things to consider and coordinate to actually effect a change like you're talking about for reuse or reusing a part of the parcel of the golf course. Do you agree with that level of complexity around coordinating all these teams together? Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you do that and how complicated is that?
Yeah, I'll use that as an opportunity to self promote a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, it can be a complex endeavor, and it involves a lot of moving parts, and those moving parts need to be managed by experts in their respective lanes, in their fields that pertain to those different components of that process. If this was something easy to embark on, I think there would be other people maybe doing it aside from us. And right. And here's the self promotion is that I feel, we're truly the pioneers in the space, in the industry as it relates to golf course, and sustainable redevelopment therein. And so we had gone to great lengths to create a team that has the capacity in house with a singular source to achieve those steps in that complex and complicated process, so that an owner doesn't have to kind of segment his roster of consultants to go and undertake something like this piecemeal, which has been done to a certain degree here and there. I think we've probably all been on a golf course at some point. You see, maybe they carved off a parcel and they're building an office park, or it happens. But there's a lot of efficiencies that I've felt over my last few decades of being around that type of development and redevelopment that are lost if you don't bring a team together that can handle and manage every phase of that project as a singular entity. And that is part of the inspiration behind us bringing together a team that is truly capable of delivering on the four pillars of our business, which you've referenced it before, but it's the golf design, golf renovation, it's the legal advisement, the real estate services, and adherence to sustainability best practices. So we have four partners that are each respective experts in their fields that are a part of our team and are with us in every step of our evaluation and redevelopment process.
Mm, okay. So you have these experts at your beck and call to help you coordinate these complexities and work together with the course owners. That's it.
Yes, and if you go to our website, which is itisgreener.com, there is reference or kind of features on each of these partners as well, and kind of their backstory and history and prowess in their respective lanes. And it's a tremendous asset, Jamie and I would be the first to say, of our company, and they really drive what we're able to provide to our clients. And so, yeah, if you ever find yourself on the website, they are listed there.
Okay, got it. We'll make sure to have that website at the end of this telecast as well, so people can make a note of it. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the. You're in Arizona, Jamie. It sounds like you split your time in between Washington State and Arizona. Jeff, it sounds like you spend most of your time in Arizona. My wife was born in Arizona. She went to ASU, so I'm very familiar with
Well, okay,
Arizona. Yeah.
that's great. Okay, you hadn't mentioned that before. That's neat.
Yeah. So it sounds like Arizona is fairly progressive or on the forefront of water restrictions. So there's this, I think you mentioned the fifth management plan, which means that there must have been a fourth, a third, a first, second, and first one. So it's been evolving. Tell us a little bit about what the fifth management plan is and why it is so impactful to Arizona or some counties in particular.
Sure. So the fifth management plan, which was technically enacted or put in place as of January 1st of this year, 2025. You're right. The fifth does indicate that there were four prior versions prior to this, and there were over the span over several decades. And the fifth management plan in the context is a plan that's put forth by the state's water resource management entity, which is the ADWR, the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And it is, as you might imagine, it's a hefty document. It's easy to filter to get to that which is specifically applied to golf courses and how their water usage is metered and how much is allowed before you start getting letters from the ADWR and that kind of thing. And the fifth management plan, which I'll speak to here, is that and is based on a certain volume of water or a certain acre feet that a 18-hole equivalent golf course will be allocated by the ADWR and as set forth in the fifth management plan. And currently, the fifth management plan indicates that the volume of water that is being prescribed for the golf courses to figure out how to irrigate their golf course with is the equivalent amount of water to sufficiently irrigate or maintain 90 acres of turf. Now, there are some nuances and complexities within that. There's some low water drip irrigation that might be in the landscape around the clubhouse. But just generally speaking, an 18-hole equivalent golf course is being given enough water from the ADWR to properly irrigate 90 acres of turf. Now, it's not as if they go through, and each one of these courses are metered, and they check the meter on an annual basis. It's not as if the ADWR is, if anything, you're probably underfunded. And so they don't have a ton of monitoring that they go out in a very intensive level. It's something that they go through just to kind of follow up on their stipulations within this case, the fifth management plan. And if they're found at the end of this year, for example, to have exceeded, and they have flex levels too. I think it's 20% on either side, up or down, where it's noted that if they exceed that volume of water, which, as I referenced before, would properly irrigate 90 acres of turf, and they're beyond that flex level, then it's not as if the spigot's going to be turned off, but it will continue to be monitored. And if you, over the span of 2 to 3 years, exceed what is that range is of flex as set forth by the ADWR, then you're going to have to take action of some type. Now, the ADWR, while they do have succeeded in achieving the legislation that if they wanted to, they could fine or cite golf courses that are infraction of this by up to $10,000 a day. Now, by their own admission, they would never do that, but it is something that is in place should they ever need it, or whether it be a fraction of that cost, but it is there looming regardless. And so after 2 to 3 years, if a facility exceeds that volume of water, you will be in a receipt of some correspondence and some communication with the ADWR with some, at this stage, kind of polite encouragement to do something, and they do need to take action. And that's something that we tell our potential clients and of these golf course owners is that just by engaging us and having us under contract to begin to formulate a plan with your facility, if you have, whether or not you've exceeded this volume, goes miles towards creating goodwill and good faith with the ADWR, because that sign of action is something that they're looking to trigger, by imposing that volume of water is kind of something that they're monitoring. So,
And I guess I'll add, and showing the community that you are being responsible and you're trying to achieve sustainability with respect to water usage. So from a PR standpoint, it really presents a positive light on a golf course.
Right. That makes sense. So is the fifth management plan, is that something that was passed into law as regulation by the state of Arizona, or was it by a particular county within or counties within Arizona? Have the other states did similar restrictive water use regulations?
yes. And, in our backyard here, in our kind of our primary market of the Southwest, the states that we feel or we know that are the most imposed upon by these looming entities or these looming restrictions by these various entities. If you just look at the Colorado River and kind of the upper and lower basin of the Colorado River, it touches 7 states, I think, Wyoming being one of them, but there's not much of a water concern in Wyoming. But, you look at Nevada, California, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. I mean, that's kind of our focus. And you see those respective states have implemented similar types of regulations. Now, and some may be as it relates to the supply being conveyed by the Colorado River, but others, and this is Jamie's former stomping grounds, but in Las Vegas, for example, they have their ADWR equivalent as the LVVWD, which is the Las Vegas Valley Water District. And interestingly enough, and coincidentally enough, as is the case in oftentimes these desert golf course areas, is that there's some implementation of effluent or treated wastewater that can be used as irrigation water on these golf courses. And even in Arizona, there's oftentimes kind of a mixed bag of using effluent and potable as irrigation water. Naturally, potable is more desirable from an agronomic standpoint, but sometimes you can kind of have a hybrid of the two where you have the potable irrigating the greens, specifically being the most valuable feature on your golf course, and then implementing effluent elsewhere. But effluent, as you might imagine, carries all sorts of other components to it chemically that create issues as it relates to agronomy and growing in and maintaining that golf course turf. But so every desert climate has some kind of variation or opportunities to implement effluent into your golf course irrigation system. In Las Vegas, there are 17 golf courses that had some level of effluent that, they were provided the infrastructure to get from the treatment facility to their golf course, and they were able to use it at a potentially reduced costs. And this was what I was referencing before, is something that was kind of fortuitous for us, in that they have passed some legislation recently where they are going to shut down those treatment facilities, and the availability of that effluent water for the golf courses in Las Vegas is going to be cut off entirely. And what they're looking to do is kind of pivot, just from a water management standpoint, their state, or the LVDWD, to invest their efforts and dollars into treating the water that they would otherwise in these treatment facilities, but treat them and then put them back into Lake Mead and then pump them back up, and it becomes almost potable or semi-potable. And so that is what they're going to focus on going forward. And so you have these golf courses that are now faced with, well, effluent is no longer available to us. It'll be a higher grade of water that will be the next and only choice for us, and it's going to be a significant, likely double increase in cost of what effluent would have. So my point in relaying that is that regulations or not, there's all sorts of resource management as from these state, kind of quasi-governmental entities that have an impact on what water is available, how much of it, and what we're allowed to use on the golf course. So.
Okay, gotcha. So we've been talking a lot about the cost side. I would imagine operating a golf course, the irrigation is a major cost, as well as probably the people. The salary costs of operating golf course are expensive. Kind of switching gears to the top line on the revenue side, I think one of the objectives of Green Lake Golf is to perhaps propose or provide some ideas on additional revenue streams to golf club owners or operators. We've talked about some of them, but maybe you could just sort of from your perspective, what would be in it for the golf course owner to think about the viability and feasibility of these other revenue streams that you may be thinking about or proposing to them?
Let me answer that by making the distinction between what we do. We call ourselves a golf course redevelopment company, as opposed to a golf course management company. Both Jeff and I have backgrounds with OB Sports in golf course management, managing the day-to-day operations. We focus on the redevelopment opportunity. And so the real revenue stream, it is the sale of an unlocked piece of property that can then be developed into an alternative use. Certainly, if there are opportunities, Jeff and I and the rest of the team can identify potential other areas of revenue streams from an operation standpoint, we can recognize that, but we don't necessarily specialize in that. That's something that we can bring another party into that can help out on the operations side. So just to want to make it clear that we're involved in the development aspects of a project and not necessarily what the top line revenue of the operations are going to generate. That's a distinction, Jeff, that I think is important.
Yes, no doubt. And I guess I would also add too that, when we talked about kind of a non-traditional golf experience being more and more welcomed and even preferred, that as it relates to some capture of potential revenue there that might not have existed before. I'll just kind of give you an example of what would be a daily fee golf course. So, not a private club, but a public daily fee golf course, 18 holes. And they have a certain amount of, space on their tee sheets. They send them off at 1 in the morning. And, there's a lot of that golf course that sits idle unused for those first few hours of the day. And you have 18 holes and you charge maybe for a cart and your rate, and then that's really it. Well, if you went from 18 holes and you converted that into a 9-hole enhanced golf experience, and then you supplement that with a 3 or 4 hole par 3 loop in another quadrant, then you have an enhanced driving range facility in another piece of that, and some pickleball courts in another, or some other kind of recreational activity or space. Then while you wouldn't charge as much for those that want to go out and play 9 holes versus what you would have charged them 18, you have other revenue generating mechanisms of a golf experience on that other piece of the golf course property that is a quicker turnaround. Playing 3 holes, you can get more people out there and cycled through. You're charging per bucket of balls on the driving range. And so you want to create an attractive driving range so that you encourage people to want to go out and hit buckets of balls. And, maybe there's an hourly fee on a pickleball court or what have you. So there are other kind of features that are still even golf based, like I said, a shorter golf, a little par 3 course or enhanced practice facilities that you can monetize from an operations standpoint and cycle patrons through quicker than it would be 18 or even 9 for that matter. But so that's something that we will no doubt get into and contemplate depending on the particular projects that present themselves. But
All right, GB, let me turn it over to you. I have questions around economics of golf course redeployment. Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about developing pro formas and modeling to golf club owners to demonstrate that you've done your homework on how these plans can be viable financially, as well as touch on a little bit about what you've seen or what you anticipate as the funding sources to actually execute and provide the monies to actually do these redeployments. If you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah. The first crucial step is for us to develop a solid construction development budget. And because we have all of the expertise in house, we can do that with a high level of assurance that we're providing a very complete picture of what this project will cost. With that in mind, we can then determine or toss around ideas of how the capital structure is going to be structured. And sometimes that might be a majority of equity. Sometimes that may be 40% equity, 40% bank debt, and maybe a junior partner comes in and we bridge that for 20%. And so once we have the costs nailed down, then we can determine, well, what's the capital requirements profile of the different capital sources. And then we can address that in how we build the capital structure within the pro forma. And that again there's no cookie cutter approach to that. It's going to be on a case by case basis. Once we know or have a good idea of what the capital sources are, then we can tailor the return or the partnership, essentially profit sharing arrangement, appropriate for those parties. And it may be an equity partner that's putting up their own money that's going to want a certain higher return. It may be a lender, either senior lender or junior lender that's going to want to have a floor, which we can address with a preferred return. And so again, there's lots of different ways to do it, but it starts with having solid cost numbers and a solid schedule on the timing to then be able to create a risk return analysis that owners are going to want to see, lenders are going to want to see as well.
I gotcha. And so the cost roll up of the project itself, obviously, having a clear idea of what the project is, and then building the cost structure up from that bottoms up, from a bottoms up approach. you have people in-house or that you utilize or even yourself would be performing some of that analysis and monitoring. Is that correct? I see. And then would you see GLG as being the center to for funding? In other words, if you had multiple investors or you needed to seek financing from multiple sources, would GLG be an integral part of helping find that financing, or would that be held or would that be performed by another entity?
No, we will take a lead role in that for sure, in helping identify sources, or certainly with an owner, if they have a relationship with their lender, certainly be in front of that whole process, and providing all the due diligence and all the financial information that a lender or equity partner may want to look at. So yes, that's forefront of what we do from a financial analysis standpoint.
Yeah, and if I could maybe piggyback on that, it's goes without saying that that's a critical piece of a project materializing. What we've found is that there's a lot of and what we anticipate encountering, or there are a lot of golf course owners out there, whether they be kind of a mom and pop family owned business, or even on a corporate level, if they own, like I know we operated Pacific Life's portfolio of golf course properties for a while. Um, but at the same time, take a mom and pop owner, for example. Oftentimes, when approached about what we are proposing on the side of sustainability and long term water conservation, and hey, by the way, we also work in it. They have ambitions to free up this developable parcel as a result, which is kind of where the real attraction is, or gravy is. At the same time, they want to do that. They're interested, but they want to be sustainable. But hey, how can we become sustainable? But we've got $50,000. Like, how do we get there? And of course, $50,000 isn't enough of a budget to incur some of the project costs that we're proposing. And so, as Jamie indicated, I mean, we're going to play a lead role in bridging that gap, through some supplemental financing or otherwise. Or like I said, it's going to be different it'll be on a case by case basis, but that will be a stumbling block to many, and that we want to be able to have a response and an ability to help our client get there as needed.
Okay, yeah, that make total sense. We're getting close to the end of our time. It's been a very interesting conversation and very insightful on your plans around working with different golf club owners, etc. Before I ask my last question to the both of you, I just wanted to remind our listeners that if you find this content interesting and insightful, please like and subscribe and share it with anyone who is in your network that enjoys golf and wants to learn more about what's happening in the golf industry. So, as we wrap up our discussion today, gentlemen, what I wanted to ask you, and please feel free for both of you to answer this, is as you've assembled and created the partnership and the company Green Lake Golf, we've talked about some of the things that you expect to happen. But when you think about the next 5 years in the golf industry and what is likely or probable or possible in the minds of these golf owners, and how you can help them, maybe you could just describe it, in your own words, what you see in the future in the golf industry and how your business can address that need.
Mhm. Uh, Jamie, you can offer, or I can jump right in, whatever.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess what I would offer is that, and we've talked about it a little bit here today, the fifth management plan. Just as there were four preceding plans to that, there's going to be subsequent plans. No, and we don't know the precise timeline, but it's likely every 5 or 10 years where we would anticipate a sixth management plan. And what we would be in a position to advise our clients is that the the water regulations and the mandates set forth in the fifth and soon to be sixth, they're not going to diminish. If anything, they're going to become more rigid, more restrictive, more limiting. Best case scenario, they'll remain static. But even if they remain static, and then you find yourselves in a drought situation, then you're really in a pickle. So I guess what I would leave you with, and kind of part of our mantra, is that we don't want to get and partner with an owner to try to get them in compliance with the fifth management plan. We kind of take this measure twice, cut once approach where we say, okay, let's reimagine this golf experience and not envision it over the next 5 years, but the next 15 or 10, 20 years in anticipation of those more rigid water restrictions. And let's not shoehorn ourselves into trying to reduce this turf footprint down to 90 acres. Let's see if we can get it to 70, 75 acres. Knowing that we won't have to worry about it for probably the life cycle of that owner on that particular property to ever be in a position where they're at threat of not being in compliance of what is the sixth or seventh management plan. And so I guess that's something that we're proposing is that, and this just goes along with responsible land and water and resource management as a landowner, is to be proactive and forward thinking about not just around the corner time wise, but for yourself and as a golf course owner, your business, or if it's a family business or otherwise, and the next generation that you may be either selling to or within your own family, and even the golfers too. I think this shift towards a non-traditional golf experience is something that is really going to flourish. And so I think that's not going away. And so I think being able to get out in front and be responsible land stewards and improve your golf experience is kind of the combination of wins that we try to encapsulate. But with that, Jamie, feel free to add.
I would want to add that, the water concerns, the usage concerns, the constraints are only going to get greater, as Jeff said. So the opportunity or the need for somebody to think outside the box and utilize the services of something like Green Lake is going to continue to grow, along with the sensitivity of what the water usage is and the sustainability benefits that it provides.
I see.
Yeah, well said.
Interesting. So the water restrictions that are inevitable or highly likely in the future really open the door to golf course owners to think about how to redesign their golf courses for other uses. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we like to kind of label it as kind of a reimagination of their patrons' golf experience, or how can we enhance that, whether it be golf specific or otherwise. And at the same time, too, we're promoting long-term sustainability coupled with some level of real estate development, which in many cases would be housing, which oftentimes across the country, it seems everywhere you turn around, there's a housing shortage. And so we have found through some of our preliminary investigative efforts that, as it relates to permitting or some of these rezoning efforts, land use entitlements, that kind of line of navigation is often eased, let's say, when you're creating additional housing, additional taxes, you're doing it in the name of sustainability. There's a reduction in water. There's just, like I said, there's a lot of wins here and wins, WIND, that we feel are kind of pushing us in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. No, it sounds like it. It sounds like a great opportunity, good timing for your business to launch and hopefully grow within the next years as sustainability becomes more important and how the game of golf is enjoyed by new generations as well. So fascinating discussion, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time. And for my listeners, again, if you like the content, please like and subscribe, and please stay transparent. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.